So for our final session, we're going to be talking about a more kind of high-level view of the Web3 space and opportunities. And I'll pass the baton to Lucas to go ahead with his talk.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And I'm looking at the questions, so just kind of keep them coming. I'll have an eye on it. I'll try, although like once I start sharing my screen, it'll probably be hard to see it. I just see the one here, where do we pitch and submit? We'll talk about that like right after my session. So the answer is like you'll find all that information on the website, but we'll talk about it at the very end. Cool. Let me start with the final session. So I want to talk to you guys about Web3 vision and opportunities. And I loved the question from Alex on right. But what's the business team of Bitcoin? Like, what does it look like, right? Like, we're not talking about like cookie cutter kind of approach to business building. Web3 is different. And I want to kind of talk to you about that. My name is Lucas. I'm part of the ecosystem growth team at Protocol Labs, so driving the adoption of IPFS and Filecoin. And Hackathon's the one that we're kind of like in the middle of kicking off today with Faber, are an important vehicle for us to seed ecosystem growth. And so I'm super excited to welcome you guys and kind of wrap this session to today. Cool. Let me start. I'm going to just jump right in. I think like historically, the success of any commercial venture has really rested on access to one or a set of proprietary resources and the reliance on some openly accessible infrastructure. Taken together, these two things have allowed companies to build differentiated, services and defensible products. And what do I mean? So, for example, on the resources side, there could be things like raw materials, relationships, access to production or financial capital, or more recently, kind of a piece of code or user data. And on the infrastructure side, it's things like roads, education, or more recently, shared internet protocols like IMAP, HTTP, and SMTP. These protocols have created a lot of value, right? Like by facilitating the exchange of information via email on IMAP or just on HTTP in browsers, they have created these like huge businesses. Facebook, all of them couldn't be like thinkable without these protocols. However, as we've all seen kind of over the past few years, the vast majority of the value that was captured through that was only done through the creation of applications that implemented a given protocol. So the protocol, like the people that developed the protocol itself, didn't really have a way to capture the value. The developers often, right, and this is kind of the equation, like value creation does not necessarily equal that you're able to capture value. And that's particularly true for public goods, right, where the consumption is non-rivalrous and non-exclusive. Actually, many of the shared protocols that we use today continue to be maintained by volunteers and open source communities. And I don't know if you saw this, went through the news a couple of weeks back, like a major flaw in some code, and suddenly the whole infrastructure crumbled that was built on top of it. What people kind of learned, because there was not really a mechanism to capture value at the protocol layer in kind of Web 2, is that investors learned that investing in applications, so Google, Uber, Facebook, things that like implement a given protocol and build products and business models on top of it, produced high returns. But investing directly in protocol technologies generally produced low returns or no returns. And so that slowed innovation at the protocol layer for a few decades, and it created room for centralized entities to emerge and capture value. And interestingly, like what many of these Web 2 applications have in common is their ability to leverage proprietary assets to really corner the market and solidify a dominant position that often feels monopolistic. And often enough, that proprietary asset is user data. And as you all know, the most successful business models in Web 2 are advertising. And what's interesting is as these like advertising companies grow and as we kind of creep up that like growth curve, the relationship with network participants. So on the one side, like the users, but also the developers, creators, and businesses that actually create value and make this network more useful, has to change from a world where everybody shares in the value that is created to something that looks a lot less balanced, right? So at the beginning, you attract a lot of users. Facebook tried to attract a lot of people to sign up to Facebook. And then over time, it began to exploit them, right? It started kind of serving them ads and all of that. And same with the developers, creators, and businesses. Think about like something like Instagram. At the beginning, everybody, please come, like here's a cool way to grow your platform. But then over time, it becomes more competitive. And how is this even possible, right? Like, why don't people leave? Well, at some point, as these platforms grow, users cannot move to another platform or vendor without substantial cost or inconvenience, right? So you can't just leave Facebook because then you don't have access to the social network that it is anymore. And that's what we call the lock-in effect. And at this time, the platform owners achieve commercial success by exploiting data from users, selling it to advertisers, and competing with developers, content creators, and other businesses over audiences and profits. And there's this great quote, I think, from Chris Dixon, who's a VC in Web3, who said, Web2 platforms depend entirely on creators for content, right? Instagram without its users is useless, but it only gives scraps back. This is not sustainable. Web2's take rate is Web3's opportunity. So when you think about YouTube and the ads that play before the video starts, 50% of that goes to YouTube, 50% goes of that goes to the person that actually created the video. And with Facebook, it's 100%, right? So often one centralized entity is able to capture most of the revenue generated. And frequently it's even 100% where they don't share any revenue with creators. And they can do that because, there's a lock-in effect and they have very little incentive to aim for an outcome that looks reasonably fair to all parties. With the introduction of blockchain, this really stands to change. As you all know, blockchains references kind of previous transactions and states of the world in an immutable chain of blocks that is decentralized and maintained by everyone together. These states document the status of who is who owns what, and who has the right to do what. What they also allow for is the introduction of cryptographically secure tokens that can regulate access to a given protocol and allow protocol developers to monetize it, right? Those are the Ethereum tokens, the Filecoin tokens, and all of the other coins out there. With that, Web3 protocols not only facilitate the exchange of information, but also that of value. And that's a huge change. And because blockchains are open source, decentralized, or many of them are open source, decentralized, and permissionless, suddenly greed, so things like taking a take rate of 100%, brings risks to those that are greedy, because network participants may take the code and fork the network if a protocol developer begins to engage in what looks or feels like exploitative behavior to a large part of the community. So suddenly what happens is that the risk-adjusted utility for protocol developers is highest if you look for an outcome that is reasonably fair to all involved parties, or even better when you work towards a state where decision-making is decentralized and the community defines the appropriate take rates. So the ability to capture value, what I just kind of outlined at the protocol layer, now creates powerful incentives to innovate at that protocol layer. And while there continue to be plenty of opportunities, and Ruben talked about this also around like dApps, at the application layer, the market cap, I believe, of the protocol will likely always increase at a faster rate. Because like the success of the application layer drives further speculation at the protocol layer. Cool. So that's, Web3 value capture happens at the protocol layer, and you change mechanisms on how you can create value, or you augment the opportunities of where to create value. I want to kind of begin to wrap it up a little bit. I think what helps me sort through the vast range of opportunities in this space is a little bit of a mental model, and I'm going to kind of walk you through this. And maybe this is particular to the Filecoin kind of universe, but I think it's pretty applicable across the board. So starting at the bottom, just here kind of on the hardware networking layer, you have kind of the foundation of the blockchain computer, right? Like, so you have the protocols on top, consensus and compute, that run and verify transactions, and then you have smart contracts who bring logic to the kind of transactions. So think of triggering certain transactions if certain conditions are met, and then finally on top you have user and client interfaces that turn these like very complex technologies into products and services that are easy to use for end users. The periphery, so kind of the top here and the bottom, are the sections of the stack where the business models tend to be most similar, I would say, to traditional business models. They're crypto adjacent, but they kind of seek to maximize revenue through other traditional means. So, for example, on the hardware networking layer, if you know how to build a hard drive really well, or because you have a huge factory that produces hard drives, you can leverage economies of scale and scope. And then the business model that you have here is just selling hard drives or improving data center technology. At the core, so like the smart contract compute consensus section, things get a little bit more wild and kind of interesting. There is still a ton of opportunities here to create and kind of like capture value. But you're relying more kind of like on network effects there in terms of like how you defend it. One really cool thing that I think people are doing in the smart contract space, especially with the Filecoin virtual machine coming later this year, is data DAOs, where a community forms around a body of data that they care about. For example, I don't know, genetic data. And in such a model, members might be able to leverage the data only if they can prove that they have actually contributed to the data set, and then whatever value is created and captured by kind of tokenizing that data is shared back to the actual creators. So yeah, there's like Web3, right? So it has very traditional business models where you just charge transaction fees or something like that, although you will likely see lower take rates than you do in Web2. And then you have the very community-driven models where you have the ability to share back some of the value that is captured via tokens or other ways of kind of value transfer that are unique to Web3. And that creates a whole new range of opportunities to monetize and build successful businesses. I want to leave you with this like thought, like whatever you build, right? And Ruben talked about this a little bit, like the feasibility, can it be built by this team? Is it viable? So can it fund future growth? Is it desirable? Does it address a real fraction and solve a real problem? And will people use it? All of this should be like thought of in the context of Web3 against the backdrop of community, right? So what's super important for all of these, because you cannot exploit users, because otherwise they will leave, they will fork the network, is that you have to have community buy-in, and that is super important in Web3. So that's why we as Protocol Labs and the Filecoin and the IPFS community, we're doing hackathons because we love engaging with folks and like hoping that they will start getting excited a bit about our technology, but it truly is existential, right? Like this is a key part for us to help grow the community, because even if we have a super great, we have a feasible product, a viable product, a desirable product like IPFS and Filecoin are, if we cannot get the community to buy into these technologies, then this will fail. And that is, I think, the key difference in Web3, where you have you have competitive dynamics, of course, and that still exists, but it has a much stronger emphasis on cooperation and community and coming together and like growing the pie collectively rather than kind of like stealing share. And that is also why this space is such an interesting and inspiring world for me to be in, because like my past career was very much focused on these competitive dynamics and stealing share. And now I'm working in a space where we're collectively working to create this groundswell and like collectively lift up the community and build economies that create value. And I very much would welcome if you guys all become part of that. So let me sum up with some kind of key takeaways here, just to kind of like run through it super quickly. So in Web3, value capture is possible still, and it spurs innovation at the protocol layer, not just the application layer. With that blockchain technology, especially if it's open and permissionless, you actually suddenly have the power to undermine centralized incumbents that are engaging in business practices that see these very greedy take rates. You will likely not see that in Web3, but it won't be to the detriment of creators. So this take rate really is the opportunity for Web3. So just go around, right? If you're looking for opportunities, which businesses in Web2 have high take rates, and look at those and see if there is an opportunity here for Web3 to go in. That can literally be anything, right? Like, can be ticketing, it can be social media, it can be the metaverse as ultimately an application or a manifestation of social media. There is a lot of opportunity to disrupt these businesses that have very high take rates and build something that is community first. And because community is so important, you need to be able to unlock these network effects, right? Like make sure that one part of the community is very closely interlocked with the success of another, and that they collectively work to kind of turn it into a flywheel where everybody's working to make everybody else more successful. At the same time, if you're coming from a more kind of conventional background and you have a very straightforward idea, there's still opportunities to just, monetize transactions or build more conventional business models. I think, like, I'm hoping, that's why I joined the space, that with Web3, we might end this creep of advertising into every domain of public life. And maybe move beyond surveillance capitalism into something that feels a lot more human and doesn't feel as exploitative. So it's really a future with rich opportunity, and I really encourage you to kind of join in on the journey. And I think that's the end of my slide. I'll hand it over back to Carlos to maybe give one more quick rundown of the timeline, because let me pause there for a second and actually take some questions. I'll stop sharing so I can pull up some of the questions that I see. And let's see, how do you evaluate the growth potential of a community-owned protocol? I think it comes down to friction, right? So I would look at, like, does this protocol unlock utility? So for the case of Filecoin, I believe there is tremendous opportunity because it solves the problem. It commoditizes cloud storage. So I think that's super important. I think ultimately, let me actually show you one slide that I really like in this. That kind of talks about, like, what do you need to look for? And I hit it in the slide. There we go. 1 second. Yeah, there it is. Share screen. When you look at, like, how a community gets started, this, like, flywheel is something that I find super interesting. So you start at the top, right? Like, a founding team has, and maybe a small community has a vision for a protocol, and that vision they convey. They say, we want to create a token that creates this type of utility, either to monetize a certain data set or to unlock, to commoditize cloud storage, or whatever it may be, or in the case of Bitcoin, to facilitate transactions across the planet in a decentralized way. That idea, that vision attracts investors who might add financial capital and say, hey, like this Bitcoin idea, that's actually pretty smart. Like I'm bought into that as an idea. And then with that, you kind of bootstrap yourself kind of into existence, right? Like with that demand, the value of the token increases. And then miners or other validators add production capital, right? So people add compute power to the Bitcoin network and say, hey, like I'm going to like try to get some of those block rewards because I believe in this token value. And and with that, like with adding that production capital, you're now adding platform functionality, right? So the Bitcoin network now has more nodes that are validating transactions, and it becomes more reliable. That functionality then attracts third-party developers, right, who are adding their time and their effort to actually create useful applications, wallets, and build this ecosystem of growth. And as you have that, now suddenly lots of people have wallets, and this Bitcoin thing works better and better. You're suddenly increasing the utility to end users who are using this technology, who then become part of a community that further kind of spurs this idea of, this is a great idea, and add kind of more momentum to the vision and the protocol, which then, the cycle starts over, attracts more financial capital, which drives up the token value, which increases platform functionality, and so forth. And you suddenly have this self-reinforcing wheel. So when I look at, I think it's an excellent question. When I look at why do you, how do you evaluate the growth? I look at like, does it have this like potential to get this like flywheel started? And community, once again, is the most important part of this. So make sure that when you're building a product, like you're actually looking at a community that is thriving, that is excited, that is welcoming, because otherwise, like you're probably kind of betting on the wrong horse. Is conducting a hackathon a go-to-market strategy? I think it's the beginning of your journey. Ruben highlighted how you can think about go-to-market, right? You can cut it by geography. You can cut it by certain target user groups that you're going for. You can also outline what features you want to start with first in your roadmap. I think a hackathon is a great way to, is a part of that. I think it can unlock different things for you. You can learn from it. You can connect with other builders. You can start building your community. And you can grow and turn this into, right, like you have an idea and you say, we participate in this hackathon and we won it. That was the beginning of our journey. And we had some first, winning the prize was the first validation that there's potential here. So it's not a go-to-market strategy, but it's a part of it. And I'm glad you're here. And I hope you make that the part of the beginning of your go-to-market strategy. Cool. Where do we pitch and submit? Yeah, cool. So Carlos, I'll hand it over to you to maybe wrap up the event. Thank you all for being here. And I'll let you maybe walk through the timeline one more time and maybe highlight all those prizes that we're putting out. I think that's good. If you want, I can pull it up on my screen if you don't have it.
I have it here as well. Okay. No worries. So thank you, Lucas. Thanks for the presentation. That was super exciting and super interesting. And I think it gave an outstanding kind of high-level overview of the opportunities in the Web3 space. Now, kind of to wrap it up, I'm just going to very quickly revisit our timeline. So we've now kind of launched the hackathon. The submissions are still open until the 21st of February. If you want to register for the hackathon, you can register up to the 21st of February on our website. So the website is Faber web3.devpost.com. We're going to share it here on the chat as well, the link. So you can register there, and you can start submitting projects from the 21st of February till March 18th. We'll then kind of do a two-step analysis of the project. So we and Protocol Labs will be kind of going through all of the projects and selecting the top 10, and those top 10 will be presented to our jury, who will select the winners. And the winners will kind of be winning. So the prizes and the award structure is the following. So we're going to have like 3 grand winners, first, second, and third prize. We also have 3 awards for the business track, which means that if you're thinking of your project not only as a learning experience or an experiment, but you really want to think about bringing it to market, you can apply to the business award, and for that you have to also send over a one-pager, kind of with an overview of what you're doing, why is it relevant, the beginnings of the go-to-market strategy, the team, just to give us an overview of the business opportunity, and you'll be eligible for three business awards on top of the other awards as well. So this is cumulative. As part of that business award, you will also have the opportunity to be fast-tracked into the Filecoin Faber Accelerator. That's something that we will be announcing more details very shortly in the coming weeks, but that will happen between mid-April and mid-July. So it's going to be a 3-month program, again, together with Protocol Labs. And then to make sure that you take chances and you're bold in terms of your projects and you go all the way to the end. We also have a pool of 15,000 euros in Filecoin to be distributed among all participants that submit a valid project. So it's been an amazing 2 days. We had some really extraordinary talks. We had some fantastic speakers. I couldn't be more excited with what happened over the last day and a half, 2 days. Now it's on to all of our participants to get out there and start building your projects. We'll be on this side kind of looking at what you build. We'll also be available both on the DevPost side, but mainly on the Discord server to answer any questions you have and to support you both from the logistical perspective and the technical perspective. So we hope you have a good experience during the hackathon, and I hope you have some fantastic projects for us to see at the end. We'll make all of the sessions available during next week. So this is all being recorded, and we'll make all of these sessions available next week for you to kind of rewatch and watch the ones that you might have missed. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone that participated. Thank you for all the panelists and speakers. And we have a question here. So you can register individually, and then on the DevPost site, you can mention when you're submitting, you can mention who belongs to your team, but everyone has to register individually. I don't know if there's any other questions before we wrap up. No? Okay, fantastic. We'll be available. Also, I'll stay on GatherTown, so I'll post the link for GatherTown here. We're going to have another kind of virtual beer hour, so I'll be available. If there's any other questions, feel free to reach out. I'll be around. Also, you can ask any other questions on Discord. Thank you very much. This was super exciting. Hope to see some fantastic projects coming out of this hackathon. Thank you very much.